Isaiah chapter 43. Isaiah chapter 43, and beginning in verse 16, Thus saith the Lord, which maketh a way in the sea, and a path in the mighty waters, which bringeth forth the chariot of horse, an army in the power, and they shall lie down together, and they shall not rise. They are extinct, they are quenched as tow. Remember ye not the former things, neither consider the things of old. Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall you not know it? I will even make a way in the wilderness, and rivers in the desert. The title of our message today is The God of a New Thing. There are moments, and I have to say, yesterday was probably one of those moments where the Concord Church had asked me to come, the youth group asked me to come and preach at their youth rally. And so the youth rallies down there are up there. They started them after the pandemic. You know, they were wanting to have something for the kids again. And so different churches had gotten together that had youth groups and were making youth rallies. And the church there at Concord, their youth was a little young. And so they were just right on that edge and like not being able to really be able to do it themselves. And so other churches got to participate in that. And the last few years, that youth group's obviously gotten older. They've grown. The church has grown, and so they took it upon themselves to host their first youth rally. And they run about 40 or 50. And so it's been great, and it's cool to see the kids interacting and everything. And I showed up yesterday, and their sanctuary, there was probably over 100 kids there. And what a tremendous blessing that was to be able to kind of let loose. I told Megan, I don't get nervous a lot where I'm up here shaking kind of thing. Those kind of nerves wear out after you do this after a while. And I was nervous yesterday, and so that was exciting because there's just something about that type of adrenaline that I enjoy. And to see the Lord work with the kids, and they had a great time. And it's moments like that that Megan and I stop when we're together. We weren't together yesterday, but we stop and we think, man, if somebody would have told us in 2018 that this was happening, we would have thought they were crazy. We wouldn't have believed them. And we do that often together. Being here and our 90th anniversary and our local association, the different things that we had this summer. I think our church in the last 3 months has hosted like 7 events or some crazy thing. And we've been pretty busy. And, I think back at that and I go, wow, if somebody would have just told me when I first got here that this is all the church would be doing so soon into my ministry here, I would have, had a tough time believing that. Just because it takes a lot of work. But sometimes what you're standing in the moment is something that you would have never imagined in the past. Today, what once was impossible is now just normal. And when you don't take that second to just look back and think, man, 2018 me or 2020 me or 2024 me would have thought where I'm at now is impossible. God made a way in the past, and as a result, you don't have to live the past in the present because He made a way. And if I would have told some of you a few years ago that you'd be sitting in church this morning, you wouldn't believe me. If I would have told you you'd been sitting in this church, you wouldn't have believed me. But God makes a way. And today, you're sitting here in yesterday's disbelief. That's the reality of it. That imagine where you'll be sitting tomorrow. Because, like I said, a few years ago you never thought you would have been here. Imagine where you'll be in a few years from now. Today, too many of us are hung up on today's disbelief. And you're not stopping for a moment to just see where you are sitting right now, here and today. Some of you are sitting in the same place that you've been. So you feel like, well, this message, I don't have a whole lot to say about this message. But I would challenge you that maybe you haven't allowed God to move you, because you're still in the same place you've always been. We always, pride ourselves that as Baptists, but that's on doctrine. That's not necessarily, though, on growth. I would be stumped if I planted a plant and it never grew an inch. It never moved. That would be horrifying, right? Because I planted it there. I don't want to wake up the next day and it's in my backyard. That would be a little confusing. But I would hope that if I watered it and did everything right, that it would actually grow. And some of us are just proud of ourselves for still being planted. Well, of course you're planted. But is there growth? To be moved requires change. If you have a reputation for being the same old you, maybe it's time for a spiritual remodel. I get tired of hearing that in churches. Well, that's just how brother so-and-so is. But is it how they should be? That's just that generation. Well, is that how that generation should act? And I say that to both old and young generations. So don't get out of here. I got enough people not here today. I don't need you not leaving too. Because at the end of the day, we need to be reminded of the fact that I don't have to be defined by the same old thing. If we are known for actions that point us to ourselves and not to Christ, are we standing today in yesterday's disbelief or today's predictability? Because you ought to be in yesterday's disbelief. You ought to be standing in a place where you're like, I don't know how I got here. But if you can trace, I know exactly how I got here, and I've been here for a long time. Too many Christians are in today's predictability. And folks can define us like that because they know exactly where we're at, because you're in that predictable place. And so it brings to mind that as we look back on the past, that there must be wisdom in remembering. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But yesterday may not be the same as today or tomorrow. So while Jesus is the same, the day isn't. And so while the days are unpredictable, the one who holds the days is consistent. Isaiah references a pinnacle moment in the history of God's people in our main passage. In Isaiah 43:16, thus saith the Lord, which maketh a way in the sea, and a path in the mighty waters. You notice he doesn't say that the Lord makes a way around the sea. He makes a way in the sea. When you're in it, it feels impossible. Because it is. You're standing where it should be a giant sea. It should engulf you, but you're walking across on dry ground. The sea's on both sides, and so the entire scenario is impossible. Yet God is making a way anyway. When you're in it, it feels impossible because it is. Impossible isn't a false perception, but evidence that God is about to work. Sometimes we beat ourselves up because we think that we've misdefined something. Oh, I shouldn't have said that was impossible. And so, because I lived through it, so clearly it was possible. No, it was impossible. God just saw you through it anyway. Man should not be able to walk across dry ground, across the Red Sea. That shouldn't happen. But he made a way when there was no way. So we can't beat ourselves up because we call the impossible possible. God showed up and made a way. Impossible is still impossible, but God changes it. He changes the outcome. In Isaiah 43:19, he says, behold, I will do a new thing. This is the impossible thing. The thing that you can't do yourself. Now it shall spring forth. Shall you not know it? I will even make a way in the wilderness. I'm going to make a way even after this. I'm not done. I'm going to make a way for you when you're in the wilderness. I'm going to make a way for you in the desert. I'm going to make the desert plains that were of no vegetation whatsoever spring forth life. Because I'm God and I can do that. You can't on your own. Remember the past, but remember God is going to do something new today. So don't stay in the past. It's not like the children of Israel like, well, you know what? I kind of like this whole, walls of water on both sides. Let's just stay here. They had to keep moving. The enemy was right behind them. They had to keep moving. And then they got to the wilderness, and God was taking care of them there. But He never wanted them to stay there. And so we need to remember the past, but remember that God is doing something new today. And so we can harp on, wow, look what He did at the Red Sea. Yeah, but look what He's doing now in the wilderness. As innovations continue to change our world of communication, if I asked you to get a word to somebody as quickly as possible today, you wouldn't drop a letter in the mailbox. Because things have changed. And the impossible has been made possible. As amazing as God has been in your life, when it comes to the work of God, there is no glory day. I get tired of hearing that. Man, those were the days, weren't they? I remember when. And then we go on this whole harp on this whole thing as if God, surely God can't do it today. Why not? What's the difference? We must learn from history. We should love Him for what He did, but know that He can still change the impossible in new ways today. And it's in new ways today. In new ways. He doesn't say, I am doing the same old thing. He says, I am doing a new thing. A lot of times we look at the past and think, wow, look what God did back then. Let's do that same thing over again and we'll get the same result. And then it doesn't happen. And then we think, well, what? I don't understand. Well, because God is always wanting to do a new thing with new ways, new people. And He asks the question, do you not perceive it? He will make a way when there is no way, because yesterday wasn't a one-time thing. His love, His grace, His power wasn't this one-time act. It's not like He's a magician and He's like, well, that's the only trick I got, guys. Sorry, I can part water. That's my only thing. But He can do a whole lot more. But man, we have hit some Red Seas, haven't we? Our marriages have hit Red Seas. Our relationships, our jobs, careers, our life paths have hit Red Seas. As men, we need to be listeners and sensitive to our spouse's needs, but also a mighty spiritual warrior and provider, right? And we hit this Red Sea. How do I be the man that I'm supposed to be, but also be sensitive? And also be a listener and not be dominant in every conversation I'm in, and that, as long as I talk loud, that gets my point across. Do we really have what it takes to cross this sea? And the answer is no, not alone. You cannot cross the sea of navigating how to be who God wants you to be on your own. If you're standing at the sea, you aren't standing at a dead end. Moses did not see the Red Sea as a dead end. But many of us do. We go down path and we go, oh, there's a dead end. I guess the Lord isn't working here. And we turn around and we start looking for the other clear path. And God's like, I got you to this impossible place because I wanted you to rely on me. If I made the path clear to you, you would never come back to me again. You would just go. I go, oh, okay, here's the path. I know what to do from here, Lord. I got it from here. Don't you worry. If you're standing at the sea, you aren't standing at a dead end, but you're standing right where God wants you. Because it's at the sea you rely on Him. It's at the sea the impossible takes place. I heard a pastor one time say, I think that they crossed on muddy land, because when you're crossing the sea of the impossible, you're going to come out on the other side, but you're going to have mud on your shoes, because that's how it works. If you want to get in the work of the Lord, you got to get in the dirt. And that sounds great, but it's not biblical. Because it says they walked across on dry ground, as if there was no indication that water even existed where they were walking. That's more impossible. And then there was that crazy documentary years ago from the History Channel, Discovery Channel, I don't know. And they said, they didn't cross the Red Sea, they crossed the Reed Sea. And I was like, okay, if you've ever been to the Sea of Reeds, the Sea of Reeds is like not even waist high in some places. Most places in the Sea of Reeds, it's about knee deep. And they go, see? So not that crazy that God would have parted the Sea of Reeds. And I go, yeah, it's not that impossible until you read this part about the fact that Pharaoh and his entire army drowned. So that's pretty crazy that Pharaoh and his entire army, the most powerful army in the world, they all drowned and went into obliteration in knee-high water. So either way, God did the impossible. Never mind the fact that we found ruins of the Pharaoh and his army in the bottom of the Red Sea, but I digress. I didn't have a lot to say this morning because I wanted to make this message clear that you need to have wisdom when you face the impossible. And I'm not a big fan of short messages, as you have come to know. But I hope that this message you don't walk away from this message this morning going, man, we got out of there in a hurry. I want you to come away from this message going, there must have been something serious to it, because he had one point. And that was face the impossible, knowing that God makes it possible. Do not face impossible and turn face and run. Do not face the impossible and be like the Israelites and say, we should have just stayed in Egypt. What were we thinking? But every change in your life will come with its struggles. Your struggle does not mean his absence. We get angry with God when we're struggling. And we turn into toddlers, wanting God to pick us up and take us out. But sometimes we miss what he's doing because we're too busy. And so as we come out of this season of all the things that we've done the last summer and early fall, make no mistake, what we have done, I pray we have done for the honor and glory of God. And not because, we need to stay busy because that's what the Lord wants us to be. Sometimes we miss what he's doing. And then as a result, we're still standing at the sea. And he's made a way, but we can't see it. Can you give him praise today? Can you throw your hands up and surrender? Or are you still holding on to excuses? Because it's really hard to throw up your hands and praise him when your hands are full of stuff. And that's the reality of it. It's really hard to open the door when your hands are full of groceries, right? It drives you crazy. And you ring the doorbell and then your husband doesn't answer it because he's laying in bed still because he doesn't realize that you got up this morning to go get some groceries real quick. I don't know, maybe I'm meddling on my own personal life this morning. But it's really hard to open doors when our hands are full of things. And it's really hard to open a door that God has for you when your hands are full of grief, when your hands are full of anxiety, when your hands are full of doubt, when your hands are full of excuses as to why you can't possibly open that door. Can you let go of entitlement and embrace humility? Or are you too busy trying to remind the Lord just all you did for him? I was proud of a family member of mine. They recently joined a church. They were out of church for a bit, and they came back to church, and they started praising in the worship team at their church, and I saw it on their live stream, and I said, and they weren't, the most talented, but I told them, I was like, man, that's fantastic that you're just up there, because you could have stood there and said, I came from this church, and we had fog machines after all. And, you could have gone that direction, and you could have said, I know, shape notes, and you don't know letters. I don't know. But, you could have had that sense of entitlement that says, if I'm going to do this, it needs to be at my level. But that's not what God requires of service. He requires your heart to be willing to go to things at His level, not yours. But some of us hold on to achievements and time spent because we want to remind God all that we've done. And maybe we have good intent there, but good intentions never breed great results. God working in and through Lighthouses is a thing of the past, not that it's only a thing of the past. But God working in and through Lighthouse is a thing of the past. But if it is going to be a thing of the present, we have to perceive it. Can you not perceive that God can work in this church? Can you not perceive that He can work in your life? Can you not perceive that He can bring young families to our church? I stood there with 100 kids staring at me yesterday, and I get nervous, and then I say really dumb jokes, and so that was really great. I represented the church well, but in all of that, and after the message, I couldn't help. I said, if any of you guys are juniors or seniors in high school, I've got like a dozen colleges within like a 40-mile radius of my church. So just so you know, parents, if you want your kids to go to some school and you're so worried that they're not going to go to a good church, you can have more of this insanity down south. And then I said that tongue-in-cheek, and then I got 2 or 3 texting me on the way home. Just how close are you to USC? That's my kid's #1 school. Well, hey, my kid's wanting to go to Cal Baptist. How close are you to Cal Baptist? And I lie to them. I tell them it's across the street. But they'll figure it out when they get down here. We don't care. But I have to perceive that God is not done. And if He's not going to get it done in the way of predictability, I've got to go weird ways I've never gone. And if that's infiltrating college campuses, then so be it. Because I don't believe that God is done in La Habra. And I don't believe that He is done at Lighthouse. But I have to perceive that. And I have to not only say it by word, I have to show it in action. If I don't believe that He is done in my life, my actions should reflect it. I shouldn't be acting like I'm just sitting waiting for Him to take me home. I shouldn't be living a life that is contrary to His will. But when others see me, they ought to see Him. Are you aware of what God can do today through you? Do you remember what God did yesterday? Because that helps your perception. That helps when you are reminded of what impossible thing could God possibly do. He's the God of second chances. He's the God of all grace. And He's also the God of a new thing. He is not done. He continues on, continuing on, even when I doubt Him, even when I don't perceive it, even when I forget. He gives me another chance. Because He is the God of all grace. Because He desires nothing more than to do a new thing in me, in His church, through His church. But it starts with me remembering what He did when I was standing at my Red Sea, when I was standing at my impossible, and He made a way. The question is what is your impossible? Maybe you're standing right at it today. And you've been standing there scratching your head wondering, how am I going to get around this? Remember this verse. Remember this passage in Isaiah 43. I don't preach from the Old Testament enough, or so I've been told. So look at verse 16. Thus saith the Lord, which maketh a way in the sea. He maketh a way in the impossible. And a path in the mighty waters, in the intimidation, in the thing that is bigger than me, in the thing that could swallow me up. That's the only thing that always freaked me out about this story. I remember when I was a kid, we were watching The Prince of Egypt. They had that moment they're going across the Red Sea, and then all of a sudden there's like lightning for some reason underwater. Can't quite figure that out. But then there's like this shadow of a giant whale, which I don't know if great whales are in the Red Sea. But you know what? Forget it. It was just the idea of like, this thing was so huge, and these people just started walking across. But it's amazing how desperate you can get for freedom. It's amazing how desperate you can get for God's promise. That you're willing to do something and cross something that can swallow you up. But you know who's holding your hand as you go across. And so have some wisdom in remembering. And the reason why there's wisdom in remembering isn't just the ability to remember it, but it's also the ability to remember it and not stay in it. Because some of us, man, we can paint a picture of the past with rose-colored glasses. Nothing was ever better than it was back then, even though when that pastor left, you were happy to see him go. But at the end of the day, it was just such, oh man, what a beautiful time that was. And man, we have this canvas of the past. And as a result, that's where we stay. Because, well, he'll never do that again. Absurd. God has always proven otherwise. Let God do a new thing in your life. Don't let him, don't belittle him, and don't shrink him down to the point of him just doing the same old thing. God continues to work and move using the same old message, but he does it in new ways all the time. And that's the beauty of being in his ministry, beauty of being in his church, is that we get to tell the old story in new ways all the time. Let's stand together. We'll have just a verse of song.